In Bolivia, food is really, really, really important to them. Learn how to eat every single thing on your plate. Don't leave anything there. And learn how to be super happy with your food. Tell the people that make it for you thank you and how much you loved it, and you'll win their hearts. Because food is so important. And maybe like if you don't like food, like in general, like you're not easy to please, learn how to eat food so like it looks like you're super satisfied. Because that's like one of the most important things to them. So definitely eat all your food and love it, for real, love it. Because that's an expression of love to the people directly. And if you refuse to eat food, that they take it very, very personally. So don't ever refuse to eat food unless you're sick. Then yeah, you should not damage yourself either. Another thing is that when you enter a room and when you leave a room, you have to say goodbye or hi to every single person. So if you're a sister missionary, that means giving everyone in the room a kiss. Well, except for the guys, I guess. But and if you're an elder, like shaking their hands. I don't know. I'm not an elder, so I don't really know that kind of things. But when you're a sister missionary, you have to say hi and goodbye with a kiss. That's needed. And it's offensive if you don't. In Bolivia, they will find every excuse to have a holiday. They have holidays so often. I swear every other day was a holiday. They have all of these holidays that are like the no driving days where you can only walk. So like there are no cars on the road, which is really nice. I liked it. Or except for when it falls on a well, on Sundays, it depends. If your area is small and you live close to a church, those days are awesome because people will still come to church. But if people have to drive to church, then that means your church attendance goes down. Well, they have a lot of holidays for different saints. Bolivia is definitely Catholic, mostly Catholic. And so they celebrate a lot of saints, days of saints. Carnival happens. Also, it's like a giant water fight. We weren't allowed to leave our house during 2 days because of that. We just had to stay inside. There are so many native people, cholitas, that's what they're called, that are in all of Bolivia. But in the city, everyone comes to sell. So along all the streets are all these little cholitas with their traditional clothes, with their skirts and their nice shirts with their big hats and their braids. And most of them are super sweet and not super interested in the gospel. Some of them are awesome investigators. But yeah, that's one thing, the culture in Bolivia, the cholitas. Another thing is everyone is super late. That's like, I was late today. I'm still trying to get back into like American time. Everyone was late. I remember that was one thing that bothered me so much when I first got to Bolivia. So my trainer was Bolivian. She did not think it was important at all to be on time for anything. And I was like, seriously, we were supposed to be at an appointment 30 minutes ago. What are you doing? And she'd just be taking her time. I remember at first that drove me crazy because I didn't understand, one, that's the culture. And usually when you showed up on time, people weren't there. You had to wait for them anyways. Church starts a half an hour late. Well, actually, it depends on the area. But in some of my areas, it started late. Things start late. Always. Word activities 2 hours late.
The phrase that comes to mind is a peculiar people. That's definitely what Bolivia is. They're very unique in their way that they celebrate different. I mean, if they can find a way to celebrate something, they'll celebrate it. The biggest thing is Carnival in February. They just love to basically have a huge water fight for 2 days. So my recommendation is don't wear clothes that you don't want to get wet. Because even if it doesn't matter who you are, what you're doing, what you have in your hands, they will throw water balloons at you, they'll throw buckets of water. Sometimes it gets worse and it's like paint. Basically, they just like to have fun and enjoy that. Other cool holidays, the 6th of August is their Independence Day. And that day is very special to them, as is our Independence Day. They really enjoy just kind of being together with the family, and that's the biggest thing, is they love to be with their families. And so on a certain holiday, they'll have grandma and grandpa come from wherever they are, and and come with aunts and uncles and cousins and be there with the family there to celebrate and to enjoy that special time. But that's the biggest thing, and they're very accepting of having visitors on holidays usually if they know you. Proselyting on a new day, proselyting to new people on a holiday is probably not the best idea, but trying and visiting people that you already know on a holiday is actually quite a good idea and something that I would recommend. Definitely they like soccer. Bolivia's not known for its great soccer teams, but they do love to play it and always out in the streets. But besides that, they just like to be with people. They like to converse. They like to work. They like to do different things. I mean, I wouldn't say there's a specific thing besides soccer is probably the number one. But besides that, just having a fun time, and they do like to celebrate. They like to party, which if you don't teach them correctly, then it involves alcohol and lots of drunk people in the street. You can enjoy yourself. And as far as cultural do's and don'ts, they do like to greet you with a kiss. Just make sure that you keep at arm's distance away from the girls, because they'll sometimes forget that you're a missionary, or sometimes forget that you can't do that. And another thing is, try not to leave food on your plate. It's a big, or if people offer you food, like one time I remember we were fasting. It was Fast Sunday, and it was the Saturday night before, and we had this investigator who's about to be baptized the next week, and she made us this big plate of food. And one thing of Bolivia, if you reject someone's offer to feed you, that's it's pretty offensive. And so I just looked at my companion and said, okay, we're fasting tomorrow. Let's end this right now. So we ended our fast, and we ate the food just because we knew that she didn't know that we meant no harm in saying no to her food. And she was just offering the best that she had, and so we ate it instead. So one thing is, as much as you can, accept the things that they give you, because it is just out of love that they do it.
The culture of Bolivia is very unique. It's one of the most highly populated people that are of native indigenous descent. There's, I think, 30 plus different native tribes and languages and cultures there that you'll get to know as you leave the city. But mostly the cultures in Bolivia are kind of divided between the mountain people of La Paz and of Cochabamba, which are the Quechua and the Aymara people, and the more Spanish influenced and the Spanish blood of Santa Cruz, which are the different cultures there. And in Bolivia, you'll get to know the term Camba, which are the people from Santa Cruz and from the east, and Coya, which are the native people of La Paz and Cochabamba, of the Aymara and the Quechuan descent. It's really awesome to see the native cultures there, and there's probably a good 50% of the people, maybe in Santa Cruz a little less, but that will have native descent, and that whether it's their parents or their grandparents will still speak Quechua or Aymara. And so it's really fun, to jump on. You'll be able to distinctly tell if they're Coya or Camba because of their dress. They'll have the ruffled skirts, the pollera, and they'll have their apron on, and they'll have their top hat or a beanie, and they'll have their ponytails. But I guess it has it's got the two braids, so not necessarily a ponytail, but you'll be able to tell if they're Quechua or Aymara. And it's really fun to jump onto a micro or do a contact on the street to some little old lady and be able to impress them, going up to them and speaking to them in Quechua, learning a few phrases, Imanaya Kashanki, is how are you in Quechua, and you say Walehia, or you find someone who's Aymara and you say Kamisaraki, Waliki is the response. So it's really fun, to go and they'll look at some white American and say, oh wow, those are how did you learn that? It's a great conversation starter. You'll learn enough phrases to be able to to impress them, and of course to invite them to baptism. In Aymara or Quechua. In Quechua, it's bautizo con quichu, is if will you be baptized, or in Aymara, one of our first families that would feed us on the mission in my first area. She was living in Santa Cruz, obviously, but she was Aymara. She would teach us a lot of phrases, and you take advantage and ask them how to say things, and what phrases would impress the people, and have them be excited to talk to you, and learn a lot about their culture, and their traditions and their values and their holidays. Christmas is celebrated a little bit differently. Christmas with fireworks, and everybody, I swear, every holiday is just an excuse to party in Bolivia. You'll find a lot of people who are drunk on the streets on those days, but it's good fun to find people who are happy and are festive and are always grateful for what they have. You will definitely be humbled to find people that are grateful for what they have. Some of the cultural do's and don'ts. Number one, if they give you food, accept it. If it's something that you're going to sit down and eat with them, eat everything on the plate. If you're able to portion what you can, that's better, but a lot of times they'll put the plate in front of you and you eat it. Like I said before, you sometimes just don't ask what's on the plate, and there's a lot of great food, but you're going to be really full, and so you got to try really hard to make sure you eat every last piece of what's on your plate. But the secret is, and here's the advice, make sure you're finishing it about the same time as everyone else, because if you eat it too quickly, they're going to think you loved it so much that you want seconds. And so if you eat it before everyone else, then they're going to bring you a second plate, and then you have to eat that too. So just kind of take your time and make sure you're not finishing too quickly, otherwise they'll bring you a second plate. But there's so many foods that are so amazing there, you're going to want to, take a second plate. The language in Bolivia, you're lucky, is really slow. Spoken very flojo, very lazily. You're not going to have too much trouble with, like the Chilenos who speak so fast that you're not going to be able to pick up half the words they say, or, other people. Obviously, in the beginning, it's going to be a little different learning any language, but the learning tips I would give you is just to pay attention to the different words that are used specifically there in Santa Cruz that you might not hear otherwise. You're not going to read them in a book. You're not going to learn them anywhere else. You have to be careful, though, when you're learning the language, hearing from the streets and whatnot. There's a lot of jerga. There's a lot of jerga. There's a lot of slangs that, as a missionary, you're not always going to want to use, because it's going to kind of break down the respect that they might have for you. And at the same time, it's going to break down a lot of barriers.
You'll come to love the Bolivian culture. Like, the Bolivian people, they're so awesome. Like I said, there's those two different kind of cultures in Bolivia, and you'll see how they're different. They have certain aspects that are different, and sometimes the two different cultures can actually kind of clash with each other. Sometimes they kind of like have different like political views or stuff like that. But I mean, it doesn't matter if they're from Santa Cruz or if they're from La Paz. Like they're still such good people, and really, like, they're really open to listen to the gospel. I mean, if you just say that you have a message about Jesus Christ, like, they're most likely going to hear you out, just because everyone down there is Catholic and they believe in God, and so they'll listen to you, and they think that like hearing about God is good, and so they want the blessings that you have to give them, like they have that basic understanding, and so they're a lot more open to it. One thing that is really, really cool is like they're very generous. The people are super generous, and like you'll be walking around, you know, and knocking on doors and talking to people in between lessons and stuff, and you'll get really tired and it's really hot, and so you just like want something to drink. And like whenever you go into somebody's house, they always offer you something to drink, like almost always. And so sometimes it's water, sometimes it's like some other drink, you know, mochacinchi, chicha, soya, whatever. And then most of the time they offer you soda, which is awesome. Like, almost everyone in Bolivia has like 2 liters of Coke. And so you'll come over and you'll come into their house and they'll ask if you want something to drink. You say yes, and then they'll just bring out a 2 liter and they'll just fill up your glass. And if you drink it all the way, they'll fill it up to the top again. So like, really good. Like that's something that just like kind of shows how generous they are. Honestly, like that happens all the time. It's super cool that they're so generous. If they do offer you food, they kind of expect you to eat as much as you can, you know. So just eat as much as you can. If it's something you don't like, struggle through it, but just do it for them, because a lot of the times, like, they don't have much, you know. Like, even the families that live in those tiny wooden shacks, when you come into their house to teach them, they'll have their kid run to the store and bring back a 2 liter Coke. So like, that's a lot of cash for them, but they'll do it anyways because they just understand the importance of generosity. One of the things that you do in Santa Cruz is it's just kind of the way that the people have set up their houses. They'll have their house, and then they have the yard that surrounds their house, and then there will be a giant wall that's around their whole property. So you can't really see their house, and when you're on the street, it's just like a street of walls, you know. And each house has like their door, and so you can knock on their door, you know, and they'll come out, and then you can start talking to them. And if you're in a poorer area, a lot of the times they don't have money to build walls around their houses, and so basically they'll just have like a wooden shack, and then they'll have their yard, and then they'll just put up like a barbed wire fence around their yard. And so you can't really like knock on their door because their door is just made out of wood. And so like, it's really common to just kind of like knocking on doors is just like you clap your hands, and people will hear you, and they'll kind of like poke their heads around the corner, you know, to see who's there. And then you can tell them to come on over, and they'll walk over and start talking to you, you know. And honestly, like, if you were to spend like the whole day doing contacting and just like knocking on doors, you could easily get into like 6 or 7 houses a day, which, I mean, compared to other places, that's incredible, you know. So that is definitely like, it's a big blessing for being in Santa Cruz. Just by knocking on doors, you'll have opportunities to teach. That doesn't mean that they're like super sincere or anything, but I mean, at least they'll let you in, and at least you have that opportunity to teach them something. And maybe you'll leave an impression on them later on that, you know, other missionaries will be able to take advantage of that, you know.
One thing that I did love is they would, like, eating was their thing. So they would make, every time you would come over, they would have some sort of snack or some new thing for you to try, because they loved baking and they loved making anything. And so they would have you sit down at a lesson, and you couldn't start the lesson quite yet. You had to try their new thing and talk to them about their life, and you basically had to make it like a party type thing. And they would always, if we were teaching one member of their family, they would start out with their whole family there, and then you would talk for a little while, and then they would excuse their family so they could listen to the lesson, which I thought was awesome, because then we got to know the whole family, not just them. And then their culture is Cochabamba is more of their thing, or they call it Kamba. And a lot of women wear skirts, and they sell things on the street, and they have a different way of speaking in Kamba. It's like more of their, what is it, slang, I should say. So some of their words are different than most Spanish speakers. So you got to learn their slang words from that. And yeah, there wasn't a lot of things that was different from us. They did have quite a few different holidays. One of them was nobody could drive one day. So one day out of the year, no one could drive or use any transportation. You had to walk everywhere you went, and they had parades that would go and just to celebrate the government there, I guess. But it was always interesting because it fell on a Sunday when we were there, and so members couldn't drive to church. They had to walk, and so it was interesting to see the whole city just walking on the streets instead of driving around and stuff. So that was a big culture thing. And then for the most part, the only thing that you couldn't do is slurp your soup. That's one thing that members got mad at me for doing, is slurping the soup. They didn't think that was nice or anything. You also, when you entered a home, you had to, most women wanted you to kiss them on the cheek or give them a hug, some type of affection. And then the men always shook your hand, because obviously we can't hug them, but the elders would hug them and kiss them on the cheek as well. And then same with their children. We would do the same for their children, kiss them on the cheek, or they would run up and hug us. And same goes for when you go to church. That's how they said hello and everything.